You have been summoned to answer for your crimes against the realm. The Council demands justice.
The Crimson Arena. The shuttle descended through clouds of metallic dust, revealing the sprawling magnificence of Nebula Citadel suspended between 3 moons. Zane Reeves pressed his weathered hand against the viewport, watching the crystalline towers pierce the artificial atmosphere like frozen lightning. After years piloting combat vessels through asteroid fields and pirate raids, he'd finally earned his place in the Stellar Championship, the most prestigious tournament in the known systems. "First time at the Citadel?" asked his cabin mate, a reptilian fighter whose scales shimmered bronze in the cabin light. "First and probably last," Zane replied, adjusting the neural interface behind his ear. "I'm here to fight, not sightsee." The truth was more complex. The frontier colonies needed this victory. The championship prize money could fund new medical stations, repair aging life support systems, and give his people hope. He'd trained for years, studying every combat form from ancient martial arts to quantum phase fighting techniques. The arena itself defied comprehension, a massive sphere of energy fields and gravitational platforms that could reshape themselves between matches. Thousands of spectators filled floating viewing pods, their excited chatter creating a constant hum that resonated through the structure. Zane noticed the royal platform immediately, suspended at the apex with its distinctive purple energy shields. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all designations," the announcer's voice boomed through neural broadcasters, "welcome to the 900th Stellar Championship." Through the shimmering barriers of the royal platform, Zane caught a glimpse of her, Princess Aria Theron. Even from this distance, her presence commanded attention. Her silver hair was woven with light threads that cast subtle rainbows, and she wore a gown that seemed to be cut from Nebula itself, shifting between deep purples and cosmic blues. But it was her posture that struck him most, rigid, almost resigned, as she watched the proceedings. His first opponent materialized on the opposite platform, a cyborg warrior from the inner systems, 4 arms wielding plasma blades. The gravity shifted, and suddenly they were fighting in 3 dimensions, leaping between platforms that appeared and vanished like thoughts. Zane's frontier training served him well. Years of unpredictable asteroid fields had taught him to think in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The crowd roared as he delivered the winning strike, his opponent dissolving into transport particles. But Zane's eyes were drawn upward again, where Princess Aria had leaned forward slightly, her interest seemingly piqued by his unconventional fighting style. An unexpected crown. The final match arrived faster than Zane anticipated. Marcus Draven stood opposite him, the 3-time returning champion whose reputation cast shadows across entire solar systems. The man's augmented muscles rippled beneath his combat suit, and his eyes held the cold confidence of someone who'd never truly been challenged. "The frontier rat made it far," Marcus sneered through the pre-match ritual. "I'll make this quick." But Zane had studied Marcus's every recorded fight. The champion relied on overwhelming force and intimidation, expecting opponents to crumble under his reputation. When the match began, Zane didn't retreat. He flowed like water around Marcus's attacks, using the champion's own momentum against him. The floating platforms became his allies as he led Marcus through increasingly complex patterns, exhausting the larger man's energy reserves. The decisive moment came when Marcus overextended during a devastating charge. Zane redirected the force, sending the champion tumbling through 3 gravity fields before landing the winning combination. The arena fell silent, then erupted in chaos. The impossible had happened. An unknown pilot from the frontier had defeated the greatest warrior in the Empire. "Victory to Zane Reeves," the announcer declared, still sounding shocked. Empress Celestine Theron descended from the royal platform, her presence immediately silencing the crowd. She moved with practiced grace, her expression unreadable as she approached Zane. Behind her, Princess Aria followed, her face carefully neutral though Zane noticed her fingers nervously smoothing her gown. "Champion Reeves," the Empress's voice carried without amplification, "you have achieved what few thought possible. As is tradition dating back 5 centuries, the victor of the Stellar Championship receives the greatest prize our empire can bestow." She paused, letting anticipation build. "You shall marry my daughter, Princess Aria, uniting your strength with the royal bloodline." Zane's victory euphoria evaporated. Marriage? He'd expected riches, perhaps a title, but not this. His gaze met Aria's for the first time up close. Her violet eyes held a storm of emotions: surprise, defiance, and something else he couldn't quite identify. She was breathtaking, yes, but more importantly, she looked as trapped as he suddenly felt. "Your Majesty," Zane began carefully, "I wasn't aware." "The tradition is absolute," Empress Celestine interrupted. "The ceremony will occur at week's end. Guards will escort you to your new quarters in the palace." As ornate doors closed behind him in his lavish new chambers, Zane's mind raced. He'd come here to save his colonies, not to become entangled in royal politics. Yet the memory of Arya's eyes lingered, suggesting she might be as much a prisoner of tradition as he was. Beneath royal masks. Sleep eluded Zane that first night in the palace. The silk sheets felt suffocating compared to his simple bunk, and the constant hum of servant drones made him long for the honest silence of space. Near midnight, he gave up and ventured onto his balcony, only to freeze at the sight of a figure scaling the wall beside him. Princess Arya pulled herself over the railing with surprising athleticism, her formal gown replaced by practical training clothes. Starlight caught in her silver hair as she turned to face him, a finger pressed to her lips. "If you alert the guards, we'll both regret it," she whispered, though her tone held more mischief than threat. "Wouldn't dream of it," Zane replied, intrigued. "Though I'm curious why a princess is climbing walls in the middle of the night." "The same reason a frontier pilot is standing on a palace balcony instead of sleeping in luxury," she shot back. "Neither of us belongs in the cage they've built." She moved past him toward his chambers. "Come. I want to show you something." Against his better judgment, Zane followed her through hidden passages he hadn't known existed. They emerged in a vast garden beneath a transparent dome, where bioluminescent plants created constellations of their own. Arya led him to a clearing where combat training equipment lay scattered. "This is where I really live," she said, picking up an energy staff. "Mother presents me as a delicate flower to be won, but I've trained in combat since childhood. I could have entered the tournament myself if tradition allowed it." "Why show me this?" Zane asked, accepting a staff when she tossed it to him. "Because in 3 days, we're supposed to marry," she said, beginning to circle him. "I want you to know who I really am, not the porcelain doll they parade before the Empire." She struck first, fast and precise. Zane barely parried, immediately recognizing her skill. They danced between the glowing plants, their battle more conversation than combat. With each exchange, he saw more of her true self, fierce, intelligent, passionate about life beyond palace walls. When he finally pinned her against an ancient tree, both breathing hard, the air between them shifted. Her eyes searched his face, finding something that made her breath catch. Slowly, inevitably, they drew together. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as they discovered an unexpected truth. What had been forced upon them might have grown naturally given time. "This complicates everything," Arya whispered against his lips. "Or simplifies it," Zane replied, pulling her closer as the garden's lights pulsed around them like approving stars. Hearts in rebellion. The assassination attempt came during the pre-wedding gala, hidden behind smiles and champagne. Zane noticed the server's irregular gait first, a subtle weight distribution that suggested concealed weapons. When the man's hand moved toward Arya, Zane reacted instinctively, pulling her behind an energy fountain as plasma bolts seared the air where she'd stood. "The marriage cannot proceed," the attacker shouted before guards overwhelmed him. But his words echoed a sentiment Zane had been sensing all evening. Powerful forces opposed their union. In Arya's private chambers afterward, she paced like a caged starcat while medical drones fussed over a minor burn on her shoulder. Zane dismissed them with a gesture he was still learning to command. "This is about more than tradition," Arya said, wincing as Zane carefully applied healing salve to her injury. "There are factions who believe marriage to an outsider will weaken the royal bloodline. They'd rather see me wed to Marcus or another elite champion." "Then we call it off," Zane said, though the words hurt more than he expected. "I won't be the reason you're harmed." Arya spun to face him, eyes blazing. "You think I'm that fragile? That I'd surrender to their intimidation?" She grabbed his shirt, pulling him close. "I've spent my entire life being told what I can and cannot do. For once, just once, I want to choose my own fate." "And what do you choose?" Zayn's voice was rough with emotion. "You," she breathed, before crushing her lips against his. They came together with desperate passion, hands exploring, boundaries dissolving. Zayn lifted her onto an ornate dresser, her legs wrapping around him as they lost themselves in each other. Every touch was rebellion, every kiss defiance against those who would control them. When she gasped his name against his neck, he knew with certainty, this was no longer about obligation or tradition. Later, tangled in silk sheets with Arya tracing patterns on his chest, they plotted. The conspiracy ran deeper than either had imagined. Lord Chancellor Voss, the Empress's own advisor, was orchestrating the opposition, planning to use the wedding chaos to stage a coup. "We could expose him publicly," Arya suggested, her strategic mind working through possibilities. "Or we could let him think he's winning," Zayn countered, remembering tactics from frontier skirmishes. "Draw out all his allies, then strike." She smiled, a predator recognizing another predator. "You really are perfect for me, aren't you?" They spent the remaining nights before the wedding preparing, their partnership deepening with each shared secret and strategy. In stolen moments between planning, they came together with increasing intensity, against palace walls during supposed tours, in the hidden garden under stars, anywhere they could claim each other away from watching eyes. Love among stars. The wedding day dawned with all the pageantry the Empire could muster. Billions watched across the systems as Zayn stood at the altar in ceremonial armor that felt heavier than any combat suit. But when Arya appeared, gliding down the crystal pathway in a gown that captured light like trapped stars, everything else faded. She was radiant, but he saw the warrior beneath, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes swept the crowd for threats. They discovered 3 more conspirators in the past day, but Voss remained confident his plan would succeed. The Empress began the ancient binding ceremony, her voice carrying across the gathered nobles and dignitaries. Just as she reached the crucial moment, Voss stood. "I invoke the right of challenge," he declared, his supporters rising with him. "This outsider has no place in our bloodline. I challenge him for the princess's hand, as tradition allows." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The right of challenge hadn't been invoked in 3 centuries, but it was legally binding. Zayn started forward, but Arya's hand on his arm stopped him. "Actually," Arya's voice rang clear, "I invoke the right of choice, an even older tradition. If someone challenges for my hand, I may champion myself." She stepped forward, her wedding gown suddenly splitting along hidden seams to reveal combat attire beneath. "I choose to fight for my own fate." The crowd gasped. Voss paled but couldn't refuse without losing face. As they took positions, Arya caught Zayn's eye and winked. They'd planned for multiple contingencies, but this was all her. The fight was brutal and brief. Voss had underestimated Arya, seeing only the princess facade she'd worn for years. She demolished him with clinical precision, each strike backed by years of suppressed fury at being treated as property. When he finally yielded, she stood over him, breathing hard but victorious. "Let this be clear to all," Empress Celestine spoke, surprising everyone with her approval. "My daughter has chosen her own path. The wedding proceeds not by tradition, but by the will of 2 warriors who have proven themselves equal." This time, when they spoke their vows, every word held weight. Zayn promised not to protect but to stand beside her. Arya vowed not to obey but to challenge him. When they kissed, the Empire watched 2 souls choose each other freely. The reception became legendary, a frontier pilot and a warrior princess dancing among the stars, their love born from forced circumstance but solidified through genuine connection. As they swayed together, Arya whispered in his ear about the adventures they'd have, the systems they'd explore, the traditions they'd shatter together. Later, in their private chambers aboard the honeymoon vessel, they came together without urgency for the first time. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a declaration. When Arya pulled him down into the observation bed beneath a transparent ceiling showing the cosmos, they made love while floating through nebulae, their bodies finding rhythms as old as the stars themselves. "No regrets?" Zayn asked as she lay across his chest, tracing the scars from old battles. "Only one," Arya replied, then grinned. "I should have entered the tournament myself. We could have fought in the finals." "You would have won," he admitted, pulling her up for another kiss. "Obviously," She laughed against his lips. But then I wouldn't have gotten to see you defeat Marcus. That was worth the wait. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, beginning their journey to tour the frontier colonies together, they held each other close. What had begun as an unwanted prize had transformed into the greatest victory either had ever claimed, a love that conquered tradition itself, written now in the stars they sailed between. The end.